Right, hello, thank you very much for tuning in. This short video is just going to be a real quick one on how, and just a little bit of information about sustainable urban living. Now, this is something that can come up in your urban topic and often can be quite a tricky question. They'll normally give you some kind of figure to work with, but you also need to bring in something of your own. So I'm going to very quickly go through what sustainable urban living means and actually give you a little bit of an example that you can call upon. This might be slightly different from the one that we looked at as our case study, but it doesn't really matter. So, all you're going to need for this, you just need half a sheet of A4 like I've done here, and then set yourself out. At any point you need to just pause the video so that you can then get some of these bits down. Okay, right, let's get started. First bit then, all right, can we keep this nice and quick? What is sustainable urban living? Okay, lots of you will probably be able to tell me already that urban is to do with cities. Sustainable, you might have some ideas, all right, but let's just make sure we've got a nice clear definition. Sustainable urban living is designing urban areas, so cities or areas within cities, to meet the needs of a population, so the people who live there, without harming future generations or the environment. Okay, so it's quite a long-winded definition there, but really important that we understand what this means, because in your exam, whenever you get a question about sustainable urban living, they're very likely to be asking you to explain or constantly refer back to this idea of sustainability. So whenever you would answer a question on this, you've got to make sure that whatever you're writing about links back to the idea that it meets the current needs of the population, but will also be looking after people in the future and also isn't going to be harming the environment. Okay, so if I'm thinking about sustainable urban living, I'm thinking things like solar panels and recycling. Okay, very generally. Okay, if I want a little bit more information though, I've got to use an example. So let's get an example in. Now the example I'm going to give you is somewhere you would have studied before, but it's been for a slightly different reason. We're going to have a quick look at the East Village. Okay, now the East Village is in the Olympic Park, which you would have looked at for regeneration. All right, and so that is in London. So the East Village in London. Okay, I'm just going to move up a little bit. So I'm going to give you three different things the East Village is doing, or what is being done in the East Village to make it sustainable. Let's start off with nice and easy. Okay, rainwater is used to water plants, and also it's used to flush toilets. Okay, so they're collecting rainwater and they're doing that to water plants in, say, their gardens or in the nearby park, and they're also using it to flush toilets. Now, the way this is done is they have a very small wetland area, a little pond, and the water, when it rains, it all seeps into there. The plants actually filter out most of any kind of chemicals or any litter, and so it's actually fairly clean by the time it's then ready to be used again. I'll draw then as well, actually. I love drawing a little picture. Let's just draw a little water drop there. All right, lovely. Now, we need to also know then actually how that is sustainable. So, why is it sustainable? Why is using rainwater sustainable? Well, it uses less clean water. All right, about 50% less than the rest of the country. Okay, so on average, the East Village is using about 50% less water or less clean water than the rest of the country. Now, this is sustainable. Again, if we think about how is this potentially helping future generations, or how is it helping the environment? Well, we need to consider the fact that actually what this is doing is this means that less energy has to be spent, less energy is used to filter water. All right. That then means that less things like fossil fuels will be burnt, okay, to power filtering stations, and that then is going to all link back to the idea that we're not damaging the environment there. We're not burning these fossil fuels, which will then potentially lead to global warming. Fantastic. Next one, next again, I'm only giving you three. Next one, okay, is 99% of waste is recycled. I mean, that's fantastic. 99% of all their rubbish gets recycled. Right? Why is that sustainable then? Well, if it's being recycled, it's being reused. So material is reused and does not go to landfill sites. All right, landfills are essentially just a big, massive pit where we dump a load of rubbish. Now that's going to be good, okay? That's going to lead to less pollution. All right, if we don't have to, if they're reusing all their waste, okay, they're not having to send it to a rubbish tip, they're not send it to a landfill site. They can reuse it. So it's actually it's not going to damage an environment at all. It's not going to pollute anywhere. All right, and maybe what I'll draw then is I'll draw some very quick little arrows. Okay, that's not a very good arrow, is it? All right, let's draw another one. That's a bit better, and I'll draw another one like that. Bit like recycling there. Okay, there we go. Fantastic. Right, last one then is about what we call green roofs. Now, a green roof, okay, it's not just the tiles painted green, right? These are either kind of roof gardens. So in London, they have quite a lot of these sort of gardens on the rooftops, or right, it is essentially roofs with plants. Now, you might maybe seen pictures of this, or maybe even come across some buildings with green roofs. Essentially, it might even just be a building with a bit of grass on the top. Okay, so rather than having, say, some roofing tiles, it'll have a bunch of grass on the top. Now, how is this good for the environment then, or how this makes it sustainable? Well, you've got to think about, in an urban area, it's mostly concrete, it's mostly non-natural substances. Now, that's not going to be good for the living species that still want to live in these areas. So what this does, okay, is it provides spaces / maybe even habitats, okay, for wildlife. Now, of course, you're not going to be getting anything like buffaloes up here. So it's mostly going to be things like insects, okay, maybe birds. All right, they're going to be able to use these spaces. So actually, rather than when we normally build an area, we normally end up kind of building on where animals used to live. Whereas this way, actually, we're providing a space for them to still be able to live. Okay. Especially, this is really good, especially put some flowers up there. This is really good for bees. I'm going to draw a little bee as my little picture. Because then bees, all right, they'll be able to pollinate these flowers that are on your roof. All right. And that's then going to mean they've still got lots of flower they can go and collect their nectar from. There we go. So, just to very quickly summarise, this is sustainable urban living. In your exam, they might very well ask you to explain or give examples of how an urban area can be sustainable. If you are asked about that and you're asked to give an example, if you're aiming for that level 3 answer, you've got to make sure that you're linking back to the idea that that sustainability is about looking after the needs of people now and in the future, and also not hurting the environment. And then you then want to try and throw in some of these specific details. So I'd be trying to think about the fact that, well, in East Village, they're recycling 99% of their waste. Okay? So that's been a really quick video then about sustainable urban living. I hope you found that useful. Thank you very much.